Welcome back to TAKEdown MMA. I'm Albert Rosales. I'm joined here by Aurelio and Steven from Throwdown. They're a couple of our boxing commentators. So, really we're just trying to cover something that's very polarizing right now for the general public, and that was the Bareknuckle boxing event that took place last night in Wyoming. So picking up where we left off on the previous segment, we're trying to figure out what the longevity of a sport like this is going to have, whether it's in the U.S. or even just worldwide. Is this something that's going to carry on? Is this something that's going to die out? Obviously in the U.K. it's been going on for years and years and years. They've been doing it forever there. It's still going strong. I know we've got a guy, I can't remember his first name, his last name is Gunn, I believe.
Bobby Gunn.
Bobby Gunn, that's
Bobby
correct.
Gunn.
Who's been doing this for quite a while, and supposedly he's one of the best bare-knuckle fighters there is in the world.
Well, you remember Bobby made, it was one of the guys that I just remember his name from the backyard brawls they used to have with Kimbo Slice.
Right.
Those guys, and once again, like you were saying, Albert, a credit to you, is these things were all, it was like poo-poo, it'll never work. When those guys made their move into the MMA, into UFC, they came with a name.
Yeah.
They brought crowds, they brought attention.
And it's a different crowd that you need to bring to the sport too, much like, we have other guys that maybe MMA fighters don't respect as much, guys like CM Punk who came from the wrestling world, but the obvious fact is that they're bringing a different crowd. So you're just bringing more viewers that maybe weren't watching your show before, which to me I think is where the BK boxing is touching on right now, is it's bringing in a different crowd. Maybe it's a little bit more of a hardcore crowd, but
well, I think my initial thoughts and my initial opinions are, like I said in the previous segment, is I think it's going to peak up and then it finally fizzle out like all the other sports that come in and try to get involved with the existing well-known fight like the UFC or the boxing. Fight. But one advantage they do have that could make it work is they've got the audience. Let's face it, people want to see that. They want to see the blood and the gore and stuff. Even in boxing, you take a fight that lasts 3 or 4 rounds and someone gets knocked out and cutting blood up. The fans love it.
Right.
Okay? You get a fight where a guy does like Pernell Whitaker and he's dancing all around the ring. Technically, skillfully, not fan friendly.
Right.
Fans don't want to see that. Okay?
Right.
So they do have a selective audience, and like you say, they're bringing a whole new aspect of people into this. And like you say, it's been done in the UK for so long, so I think it's an uphill battle for them to get nationwide where they can do the fights anywhere they want. But they do have a strong
But see, that's where I have to disagree with you, because once again we come back to the MMA and UFC. That was an evolution from the Tough Man competition, right? Because you remember the Tough Man competition, the people like myself on the radio, boxing purists, watch one episode of that, you go to one of those Tough Man competitions, you're like, oh, hell no.
Right.
This ain't going to work.
Well, see,
but as soon as you refine it,
I thought the same thing. I thought the same thing because I've always been boxing. And it isn't until now that I'm actually starting to watch MMA and understanding, and it's not that Tough Man thing.
That's what I'm saying.
These fighters that go in that ring all have their specialty, and I never knew about jiu-jitsu, about taekwondo, about all the different styles, the striking styles, until I met you guys, and then I actually started to focus. And these guys know what they're doing in the ring. It's not barbaric. They actually know what they're doing in the ring, and if you understand the rules and you understand it, I enjoy it.
So having said that,
how many people used to ask me, what is MMA? And they didn't even know that it was mixed martial arts.
Right.
So it was like,
and back when I started, it was called NHB, which was No Holds Barred.
I
So
remember
back when
that.
I started, it was illegal everywhere. Colorado was one of the few states that allowed it.
I remember.
My second fight. So back when I started, there were no amateurs. When you fought, you were a pro. You got paid. You were a pro right when you fought. My second fight was in Tijuana because you couldn't fight here in the States. So I fought in Tijuana at this nightclub called the Baby Rock. Okay, so
you win?
I didn't. It was doctor stoppage. I actually I fractured my orbital bone. When they stopped the fight. But that was way back in the day, and to see where it's at now. But so you were talking about how boxers back in the day viewed the UFC and MMA in general. What is your take, coming from the boxing background, what is your take? What are some of the difference you see between MMA and the boxing world? Advantages and disadvantages, any of the above. I know we've heard a lot of talk about like Floyd Mayweather coming over to the UFC and blah, 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 and I just think it's a bunch of hype, but
I do too.
what are some of the main differences you see? Aurelia, what are some of the main differences you see with that?
I think the crossover fights, like Mayweather going into MMA and vice versa with Conor coming in here, I don't think they'll ever work just because of the rules. In boxing, you know where your target space is, from the belly button up and from the front side of the thing. So that's your target. You don't have to worry about being kicked in the shins. You don't have to worry about getting your knee blown out. You don't have to worry about anything. You don't have to be worried about taking down and someone breaking your arm or putting you to sleep. You don't have to worry about that. Boxing is all striking. It's all technical. So when a boxer, if he goes into MMA, there's just no way he can win. They can't. I mean, he may get lucky and land a punch before he gets taken down. Okay, but it's unlikely that he has a chance to really come out of that ahead. And same thing with when the crossovers, like when Conor came over to boxing, his skills are completely limited.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you take away probably 60-70% of his game because all he can do is strike.
Right.
And if he's not a striker, he's in trouble, which we saw.
Right.
Which we saw. So I'm just thinking that, even though they're combat sports, they're really in two different worlds. They're two different worlds. And like I say, I've never wanted to get into MMA.
Aurelia, what are your thoughts?
I just agree with you that there's a spot, for lack of a better term, there's a spot in combat sports for bare knuckle brawling, because like you said, there's different niches that people have. I was more impressed with when MMA first started making their move, was because you went from just guys fighting to guys that were skilled.
Right.
And like you said earlier, from a guy that's a great boxer, once he goes to the mat, he's in trouble.
Well, and we've seen it before when James Toney came and.
What about Ray Mercer when he fought?
Ray Mercer.
Yeah.
Ray Mercer was another one. I think Ray Mercer actually won a couple of fights, I believe. In fact, I believe he beat Tim Sylvia, who at one point was a UFC heavyweight champion. So, he had a couple of good wins, but he was another one who was at the end of his boxing line.
Exactly.
And so he was just trying to make some money.
And all he was doing is laying for that one big punch. And that's once he drops it on that's where his boxing skill overwhelmed, But like you said, man, there's a niche for it. I hate to say this just for the boxing purists, but I was impressed last night. I mean, with the overall, and like I said, I was just there to watch Alma.
Right.
But to watch the overall thing, I heard that, the stream was grainy and hard to look at. I didn't see that. I thought it was pretty good, But the bottom line is, you have to remember it was in Wyoming.
Right.
And Wyoming is still part of what we consider Wild Wild West.
Their airwaves are different.
We still call Wyoming the Wild Wild West, but kudos once again to Dave, filming that he went and found that he could get it done.
Well, and you have to start somewhere. So,
exactly.
you have to do what you have to do. But,
exactly. How do you see it coming?
Well, to me, as far as I'm concerned, the main difference between a high level boxer and a high level MMA fighter, to me, is it's in the details. You don't find a lot of MMA fighters who have the kind of footwork that some of the high level boxers have.
Yes.
Okay, the footwork to me is huge. I think there's a big difference there. The footwork, and then obviously the striking is at a different level. Like as far as boxers are concerned, all you have to worry about is from the waist up. So
exactly.
So I see it. It's going to be hard for a lot of good boxers to make it. Yeah. I know there's a couple out there. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of him, Alessio Sakara, who I believe is I think he's Italian. But at one point he owned a world title in boxing, and he came over and he's obviously doing his thing. To me, it's just in the details. It's the main part. The footwork for me is the key.
Do you see this lasting more than a couple of years? Is
You know,
just right off the top of your head.
To me, this is something you have to keep fresh in people's minds.
Okay.
You know, so if you wait another year and a half to put on another event, who knows how it's gonna turn out. Like, to me, you have to stay fresh with it, and you have to keep the events coming.
Yeah.
So, you know, if we're looking at 3, 4, 5 months down the line, he puts on another show, then maybe it's a good turnout, you know. And obviously, MMA fighters want to stay busy. Okay, so to me, if you can't get a fight, if you're signed to an organization that's not a major organization, somebody who doesn't have you in an exclusive contract,
can make it work.
Then this is a good place for you to make extra money, stay busy while you're waiting for something else to come along. You're still, I mean, it's tough.
Though. Big chance.
But to me, there's not a big difference between 4-ounce gloves and no gloves. You know,
right.
From what I understand, the tape job is you were allowed to have tape on your hands up to an inch away from the knuckles. Correct.
So you get some protection.
Right. So if anything, you're protecting the bones and the wrist, but you know your knuckles are still exposed. So, but to me, it's not a far reach from 4-ounce gloves to that. I mean, it's still some protection you're missing out on, plus the hand wraps. So who knows? But you're not taking the repeated trauma from the head kicks, from the elbows, from the kicks to the legs, the kicks to the body, that kind of stuff, the knees to the body. You're not taking any of that damage. So while it's not quite as safe as going from MMA to boxing, and I say safe, not that boxing's not safe, but you know, obviously, you know, 8-ounce gloves, there's, you know, a fair amount of protection, but it's still safer in terms of them taking a kickboxing match.
You know, I think the keys, the key and the differences in MMA and boxing, because boxing is striking, okay, and we get to the damage that you get into your hands, and people may say, well, why don't MMA boxers get the damage, the knuckle splattering in the wrist and stuff like that, because they still throw punches and they still hit, but they don't get the damage like a boxer is. Well, I think what people need to understand is the differences in the stance, okay? Leverage from your punches come at the end of your punches, and they come from your body, okay? So the stance in boxing is a stance that enhances that promotes power from your punches, okay? Because you don't have to worry about getting kicked in the leg. Where in MMA or something, you've got to worry about that. So your stance has to be flexible so you can go, your feet have to roll just like a boxer has to roll with their punches on the top. In MMA, your feet have to roll. You can't take a solid kick to the feet or you're going to get something broken, okay? So the stance, but being that the stance is completely different, it takes away from the power in your striking. It does. And I think once MMA fighters understand that and you get someone that can switch their stance, they'll actually be successful in boxing. They actually will. But that's where the danger of the injuries to the hands come in this bare knuckle thing. Because if you get a boxer that knows his stance and he doesn't have to worry about getting hit in the leg, he can leverage his punches 100%.
And that's why I said I was thinking off the top of my head 2-3 fights. Because first the cuts, that always plays a major role into any continued competition.
Right.
And then, like you said, they're going to have some type of. That's the only thing they didn't talk about too much. But after each fight, there's going to have to be some brain scans or something done because of the punishment that is absorbed. You want to watch out when he's talking about safety. Okay, that has to be done. Okay.
Well, to me, the first big hurdle is going to come for them the first time somebody gets a major injury.
Yeah.
Okay, then where do you go from there? Yeah. The backlash you're going to get from there. I know in MMA it was the same thing when they first started. Yep. So the backlash you're going to get from something like that is what you're going to have to be able to survive. And honestly, like, it's just a matter of time, you know. Like, I mean, obviously you don't want to see somebody get hurt, but in a sport like this, in any combat sport in general, it's going to happen.
But that's why I said
hundreds of deaths in boxing. Okay, we've had deaths in MMA, and MMA is fairly young, but there's been deaths in MMA. So in any combat sport, you're looking at some kind of problem like that. And obviously, we don't wish that on anybody, but
and that's why I said I thought it was important that he mentioned Dave Feldman, that he was doing everything in his power to make sure it was safe. You know, you kind of poo-pooed the two physicians, the two ambulances being there. he was kind of putting that cart before the horse.
Because that's what you expect.
Want to be able to say, hey man, and nobody would dispute it. You know, even though the backlash, like you said, is still going to come. If you've done everything that's foreseeable, and then when something else happens, they can say, well, from now on you need to do this or that. That's the same thing they did with boxing.
And you know what? Personally, in my opinion, that was overkill, but it was a good safety factor. And I'm going to tell you why. Let me explain why I feel it was overkill.
Well, he had 10 fights.
Because it's still overkill because the damage that boxers get, long-term damage, the dementia and all that stuff is from repeated hits, okay? And the reason why is because of the gloves. Okay, you got the gloves that protect, so a fighter can take repeated hits, which in long term equals to more damage, more brain damage.
Right.
Okay? Bare knuckles, you don't have that. So basically, one shot, you're going to get knocked out. And in a weird sense of saying this, but I'm trying longevity, safety-wise, that's actually better. Because you're not going to take the repeated hits. You're going to take the 1-2 hits, you're going to get knocked out, you're going to lose the fight, but you're going to have your marbles.
And if you look back, even if you go way, way back, you go to the original rules of boxing, when they didn't wear the gloves.
Yes, exactly.
You could be fights were 100 rounds.
You could be waiting 10 minutes before somebody threw a freaking punch.
Exactly.
And this is kind of the same too. Obviously, in my opinion, I think overkill is good. Because you're telling the public that we're going to be ready for this in case something bad happens.
I agree.
Just so you know, we're trying to do things the right way. So hey, I think he's doing a good job. Who knows how far it's going to go, but
I do agree with you. I'm not for the big gloves in boxing. I think everyone should stay with the small gloves. I mean, when I fought in 6-ounce gloves. Okay. I can still talk, as you guys can see, and I got hit pretty much.
I don't know.
But what I'm saying is, the larger gloves, people think it's a little more protection, but it's more damage because you can take more hits.
Well, let's be honest. The gloves are protection for your hands.
Exactly.
We're not protecting your heads.
So bare knuckles is actually harder on the guy delivering the punch, the damage to the hands,
right,
than it is to the guy who's going to get hit and knocked out. So
well,
there you go.
that's going to do our segment for today. I really hope, obviously people want to make money and they're always looking for the next big thing. So who knows how this is going to turn out. I wish you nothing but luck. And Alma, everybody here in Denver, we love you. We support you. Way to put up a fight, and you represented us well.
Albert, thanks for having us, man. I've been begging to sit in with you and listen and rack your brain.
It's always good to get a different
very
view.
impressed.
Thank you.
I'm very impressed.
Thank you very much.
I'm always interested. Well, next week you guys can go ahead and recap all the fights because I know the audience loves that. I myself I'm becoming a big MMA fan.
Have to be.
And I find myself watching it all the time. So it's good.
Thank you. I appreciate you guys being here with me today. Evan will be back next week. We'll cover some of the past UFCs that we had last week, some of the fights we had last week, plus the fights that we have coming up. Join us again on ibtv.us, on Roku. You can find us there too. This has been Takedown MMA. I'm Albert Rosales, Aurelio Martinez, Steven Johnson. Thank you guys so much for joining us. If you have any questions or you disagree with us, please go on there.